Hello, dear friends. You are watching Ruslan Bailov's channel, and this is your regular daily update on the course of combat operations on the Ukrainian front. Friends, after yesterday's episode was released, I carefully read through the comments, and perhaps the most frequent and insistent question you asked concerned Kupiansk. What is happening in Kupiansk right now? What condition is the city in? Who controls it? The information space has been flooded with a huge number of contradictory reports. Some claim that Russian units have been encircled there, while others, on the contrary, insist that the situation is stable and that nothing critical is happening. Let us calmly and without emotions figure out what is actually going on. I want to immediately point out a key fact. At the moment, there is extremely little confirmed information supported by objective control footage. Very little. At the same time, it would be incorrect to say that there is none at all. In particular, there are videos available publicly, not from Kupiansk itself, but from an area north of the city. These recordings confirm that the armed forces of Ukraine have taken control of a pumping station. This is precisely the area that is now marked on the map as having come under Ukrainian control. In addition, there are video materials showing Ukrainian units operating directly in the central part of Kupiansk. Now let us take a closer look at the current situation. As you may notice, cartographic resources are updating information very sparingly. In fact, changes have been reflected only in the northern part of the city, which is why the analysis has to rely not only on the main map, but also on additional data. At the same time, it must be noted that a number of maps contain inaccuracies. For example, the depiction of allegedly complete Russian control over the left bank part of Kupiansk does not correspond to reality at this moment. Most of this territory is no longer under full Russian control, and the previous color coding of the map is misleading. Moreover, there is video confirmation that Ukrainian units control the dairy and canning plant. This refers to a complex of buildings located along Zaoskolna Street. Does this mean that there are no Russian units left at all in the eastern part of Kupiansk? No, such conclusions cannot be drawn. However, it is equally important to emphasize the opposite point. At present, there is no confirmed video evidence in open sources that would unequivocally demonstrate the presence of Russian troops in this area. One key factor must be taken into account here: the terrain. Losing control over the right bank almost automatically makes holding the left bank part of the city extremely difficult. The difference in elevation is such that if the right bank is controlled, the left bank becomes fully visible and exposed to fire. I would even like to draw your attention specifically to the elevation map. The western bank is significantly higher than the eastern one, and from those positions, the latter is literally laid out in full view. Any movement immediately becomes a target. Yes, it is possible to hide in basements, but there is practically no sense in holding positions in that manner. That is precisely why, in the event of losing the right bank part of the city, withdrawal from the eastern bank looks like a logical and rational decision. This brings us to the next question. What is happening on the right bank of Kupiansk? According to the information available to me, the Huliaipole micro-district is no longer under Russian control. This, however, also appears logical. A few days ago, Ukrainian units captured the college building. I spoke about this in detail in one of the previous episodes. After that, a real threat emerged that the armed forces of Ukraine would increase pressure on this sector, which could have led to a complete blockade of Russian units. In such a situation, a decision was made to withdraw. And this was the correct decision. It is better to leave positions in time than to be encircled. As I have said more than once, sitting in cauldrons is a favored tactic of the Ukrainian side, but repeating that experience is clearly not advisable. The settlement of Moskovka should be mentioned separately. On some maps, it is marked as being under Ukrainian control, but in reality the situation is different. Moskovka is currently controlled by neither Ukrainian forces nor Russian forces. It is a grey zone, or if you prefer, a kill zone. All structures there have been destroyed, there is no cover, and holding any positions is simply impossible. Therefore, depicting this area as Ukrainian-controlled is incorrect. As for the central part of right bank Kupiansk, Russian presence remains there. To say that the city has been completely abandoned and that troops have fully withdrawn would be inaccurate. At the very least, in the areas of high-rise residential development, Russian units continue to hold positions. However, the key problem remains the same. Logistics. How is supply to be maintained? This is precisely why resistance here is more localized and fragmented, rather than representing a unified, well-organized defensive line. As I noted at the very beginning, there is still insufficient reliable information to clearly and confidently delineate the line of contact within the city. Positions are intermingled, and on the same street there may be both Russian units and fighters of the armed forces of Ukraine. Nevertheless, a cautious conclusion can be drawn. Most of the right bank part of Kupiansk is already under Ukrainian control, and as we have already discussed, the loss of control over the right bank automatically entails the loss of the left bank as well. To summarize, on the left bank, Russian control is preserved only on the northern outskirts. On the right bank, control remains in the central part of the city and in the northern districts. Overall, if we consider Kupiansk as a whole, it can be said that roughly 20% of the city's territory is under Russian control. Now let us move on to the broader context. Even if it becomes known in the coming days that Russian troops have completely left Kupiansk, would this be a catastrophe? Absolutely not. And this is not an attempt to reassure anyone, it is a sober analysis of what is happening on the front. Tell me, would the loss of Kupiansk affect the successes of the Vostok grouping on the Huliaipole axis? No. Huliaipole will most likely be lost by the Ukrainian side in the very near future, after which Russian units will continue advancing westward with the prospect of reaching Zaporizhzhia. Moreover, even before the end of the current year, one of the key defensive lines, the Huliaipole line, has already been breached, and a stable bridgehead has been formed there with control over 3 settlements. This bridgehead continues to expand. Would Kupiansk influence the clearing of Mirnohrad or the situation in Rodinske, where Ukrainian units have been encircled? No. Both cities are on the verge of falling and will soon come under the control of the Russian army. Perhaps the loss of Kupiansk would stop the advance towards Sloviansk from the Siversk direction or halt the offensive toward Lyman. Obviously not. I am giving all these examples to emphasize the need to perceive local setbacks rationally and not fall into hysteria. Look at the Ukrainian side. They lost Siversk. Was there panic? No. They lost Pokrovsk, and now Mirnohrad and Huliaipole have effectively been lost as well. Did we see hysteria? We did not. Over the past month, they have lost Vovchansk, Pokrovsk, and Siversk, and they understand that they will soon lose 2 more cities. Yet they are not engaging in demonstrative ashes-on-the-head despair. As for the Russian army, Kupiansk has not yet been completely lost. Control remains. Therefore, it is premature to speak of catastrophe or to sink into despondency. The problems on the Kupiansk axis are local difficulties confined to one specific sector of the front. Moreover, this sector initially appeared problematic due to weak logistics. Perhaps entering the city without reliable supply lines was indeed ill-advised. The Ukrainian side took advantage of this because on other directions it has failed to achieve success, and so all forces were thrown here in order to demonstrate at least some result by the end of 2025. If we look objectively, after the brief success of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region in 2024, they have not achieved any further significant gains. Throughout 2025, they have mostly been losing settlements. On the rest of the front, the Russian army continues to advance. Yes, here the Ukrainian side has achieved temporary tactical successes, while it still has reserves and the ability to throw new forces into battle. But this does not mean that the front is collapsing. The situation is exactly the opposite. The Russian army is advancing almost everywhere, pushing forward, capturing settlements, storming cities, and only in one place has the Ukrainian side managed to achieve a limited tactical result. Now let us move on to the Huliaipole direction. Here, Russian units broke into the headquarters of the 102nd Territorial Defense Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Ukrainian soldiers abandoned their positions so rapidly that all their property was left behind: laptops, tablets, documents, orders, and flags. The headquarters was captured almost instantly and without resistance. Over the entire course of the conflict, there have been very few episodes like this. This indicates serious problems within the Ukrainian armed forces with infantry manpower. There was simply no one to deploy for defense, and as a result, units were committed that immediately abandoned their positions once the situation became critical. The Ukrainian resource deep state reports that organized defense in the city has effectively disappeared, and Huliaipole has essentially turned into a gray zone. This means that Russian units may already have reached the western outskirts of the city. Judging by the current dynamics, the clearing of the settlement could be completed in the coming days, even before the end of the year. Further along the route toward Orikhiv, several smaller settlements remain. The Ukrainian side has managed to construct another defensive line along the Verkhny-Tisa River, which Russian forces will also have to overcome. After that, Russian troops will find themselves in close proximity to the outskirts of the large city of Zaporizhzhia. In addition, in the area of Stepnohirsk, Russian units continue to advance northward and eastward, toward Veselyanka and Hrihorivka. These settlements are of critical importance, as they effectively constitute the last defensive line before Zaporizhzhia. From Hrihorivka to the southern outskirts of Zaporizhzhia is about 13 kilometers, which means that FPV drones can already be used to strike the southern districts of the city. Meanwhile, the situation for Ukrainian units in Constantinovka has noticeably deteriorated over the past few days. This was reported by Ukrainian military analyst Konstantin Mashovets. According to his assessment, Russian forces are increasing their activity both within the city itself and on its approaches. According to the expert, Russian advances are being recorded simultaneously on several axes, while pressure on Ukrainian defensive positions is steadily intensifying. Mashovets emphasizes that Russian units have managed to seize a number of commanding heights southeast of Konstantinovka, after which small assault groups began entering the southeastern outskirts of the city. Providing further details, the analyst notes that the presence of Russian troops is already being recorded within Konstantinovka itself, on the stretch from Ostrovskogo Street to the City Drive service station. In addition, Russian units have been spotted on the southern outskirts of the settlement of Ivanopilia. The most alarming situation for the Ukrainian side, according to Mashovets, is developing on the southwestern flank. Advancing along the course of the Kazany-Torets River, Russian forces over the past month have taken Volodymyrivka and Shakov, become engaged in fighting for Sofiivka, and advanced in the direction of Rusin Yar Novopavlivka. At present, the expert notes, intense attacks on Sofiivka are underway from two directions at once, creating a direct threat of a further breakthrough toward Druzhkivka. Speaking about possible further developments, Mashovets suggests that in the near future, the Russian command may focus on solving two key tasks. The first is an attempt to bypass and roll up the Ukrainian defense in the Chasiv Yar area by striking from the south, which would allow Konstantinovka to be more deeply enveloped from multiple directions. The second task is the continuation of offensive operations in the Sofiivka area, with the aim of reaching the approaches to Druzhkivka and creating a threat to the rear areas of Ukrainian units defending Konstantinovka. At the same time, an increasing number of experts are coming to the conclusion that the Ukrainian army is rapidly moving toward a systemic crisis bordering on a military catastrophe. This assessment is now shared not only by Ukrainian analysts, but also by Western military experts. According to them, even formations that were previously considered elite are no longer capable of effectively carrying out assigned combat missions. As one of the most illustrative examples, analysts cite the fate of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, known as Magura. This formation was created specifically for the 2023 counteroffensive. Its ranks were filled with the most motivated soldiers and officers, and the brigade was equipped primarily with NATO standard equipment as well as Western-made small arms. However, the very first battles in the Zaporizhzhia region in the summer of 2023 clearly demonstrated that the expectations of the Kyiv command regarding this brigade were, to put it mildly, excessively high. In a very short period of time, Magura lost a significant number of German tanks and American infantry fighting vehicles and underwent its first reorganization. Subsequently, similar situations occurred more than once, including after the defeat of Ukrainian forces in Avdiivka. In September of this year, a 26-year-old native of Zhytomyr region, Maxim Danilchuk, was appointed as the brigade's commander. After that, according to Russian military sources, the brigade effectively turned into a reservoir for replenishing Ukrainian assault units. Personnel were drawn off to shore up the most problematic sections of the front. At present, battalions of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade are operating simultaneously in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, as well as in the territory of the Donetsk People's Republic. Such dispersion, in essence, deprives the brigade commander of effective control over his personnel. It is noted that the Foreign Legion Battalion carries out only those tasks it considers a priority, while the young brigade commander is largely left to attend official events and appear in group photographs during award ceremonies. At the same time, the brigade's media activity has sharply declined, and along with it, volunteer support has virtually dried up. According to servicemen, they are experiencing an acute shortage of even basic assets such as Mavic-type quadcopters, not to mention heavier drone systems. Serious changes have also occurred in terms of material support. Whereas previously, the backbone of the brigade's equipment fleet consisted of Leopard tanks, these have now been replaced by outdated Soviet T-64 and T-72 tanks, restored after severe damage, often in semi-underground conditions. In addition, according to Russian military sources, the brigade's patronage service, which previously dealt with issues concerning missing, wounded and maimed servicemen, has virtually ceased to function. It is important to note that a similar situation is currently being observed in many other formations of the armed forces of Ukraine that were still referred to in Kiev as the elite of the Ukrainian army just a few months ago. In particular, an extremely difficult situation has developed in the 155th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Anna Kievska, from which, according to available information, thousands of soldiers and officers have deserted.